This is an Icon Ministry production with the support of our ministry partners and donors.
I often see young people living together, cohabiting, and I often say, why don't you get married? And sometimes I get a response like, marriage, it's just a piece of paper. Well, it isn't. Marriage is not just a piece of paper. You know what a piece of paper is? A contract is a piece of paper. But marriage is not a contract. It's a covenant. There's a big difference between a contract and a covenant. You see, a contract is something that is mutual. I'll give you 50 if you give me 50. I'll give you 100 if you give me 100. That's a contract. I have a contract for a building. I'll give you $500,000. You give me the building. I'm going to give you a certain amount of hours, and the contract is that you pay me for those hours. But marriage is nothing like that. It's a covenant. A covenant is not about giving 50 and receiving 50. It's about giving 100 and receiving 10. It's about giving 10 and still receiving 100. It's about giving and not expecting anything back. It's a giving of self. Contract is for a certain amount of time, right? You know, I give you my work for a certain amount of time. Once the contract is over, then I'm free to walk away. A covenant never ends. A covenant is forever. A covenant is what God does for us, right? He gives himself totally to us. And so he doesn't back off from the covenant. A contract, yes, you can back off from a contract. You can breach a contract. You cannot breach a covenant. We are called to be faithful even when there is a breach. And that's why it is so difficult. And what God has done has taken Adam and Eve, and from the side of Adam, he created Eve. You see, now Adam is incomplete without Eve. Together, they are complete. They are one in the image of God. And that is the consequence of a covenant, that when we give each other to each other, when I give myself to you and you give yourself to me, then we become what we call a sacrament, a sign of God's love. Marriage is a sacrament. It's not a right, but it's a privilege that we get to share in becoming a sign of God in this world. This is what marriage is. God's covenant for us, that he loves us unconditionally, that he loves us forever, that he loves us freely. When we are together in this covenant of marriage, we become a sign to this world. You want to see how God loves us? Look how I love my husband, my wife. You want to see how God is never going to let me go? Look how I'm going to never let go of my husband, my wife, even when things are not right, when things are not good. We become this sign. But hear me out. It is so difficult, right? It's so difficult to be faithful, to stay faithful, especially when we're not receiving. But this is why we need to depend on God. This is why we need to turn to God and say, God, you give me the strength to love my husband, to love my wife, to stay faithful even when I don't want to stay faithful, when I feel I don't have the strength to do it. You see, it works in a circle. I cannot love my spouse faithfully unless I let God love me. And really, I can't really love God unless I fulfill this covenant in being faithful to my husband, to my wife. God calls us to trust in him. And in trusting in him, we have the strength to live out this covenant, not this contract, this covenant of loving and serving unconditionally.
This production is only made possible because of the generous support of Icon Ministry partners and donors. Please go to iconministry.com/support to make a donation.